History and Legacy Project to interview Preston Schumacher of Chicago and Doug Reynolds of Kansas City. Preston has been on the NA board several times, both as director and recording secretary. He's completed his second term as director. Doug has been on the board twice, in the second term, and they both completing a term as co-chairs of the awards committee. So welcome to the project. Let me ask you both, and since you are from different chapters, and obviously you'll have somewhat different stories here, but how did you first become involved in DWMT? And that's presumably you doing local level.
And I stumbled upon DWMT Milwaukee, and it just welcomed me with open arms. And I just had so many questions about everything in the chapter. Individuals were great, but the leadership was wonderful. They embraced me and really made me feel welcome. So it was fully summer with that.
What caused you to go to the first meeting or to get involved initially? How did you find out about it? What was it?
I looked at the telephone book. I actually looked at the telephone book, and of course I had to do the procedure because I again, I was a new. And I called the number, and it so happens that it was some sort of mixer that evening. I think they were having movie night at that point. It was actually Dale Cascada's house. And so I went over to Dale's house, and he was this funny little man who was this wonderful, wonderful man. Just embraced me from the first second he opened up the door in terms of making me feel welcome and easing my uncertainty and my nervousness, and he was making me feel very welcome. And from that point on, I knew it was going to be my relationship. And what about you, it was at least 50 people. It was 50 people of various ages. Probably there's a few 18, 17-year-olds there. So they just welcome as well. But it was a big group.
Were you able to become a member of the chapter right away at that age, or was there some limitation?
There was some limitation. And Jill explained to me what the organization was and what was going on, and I was asking him if there anything around for youth at that particular time, and there wasn't. And what the chapter ended up doing was, like they used to have general meetings on Saturday night, and I used to just go and listen and just see what was going on. So I just pretty much did that for a minute, just stuck to the business in terms of what's going on with the organization, and really tried to gain a further understanding of what's going on. But I call them the elders of the organization were wonderful. They actually kind of adopted me, and D.A. Leonard was a big part of that. I've always called him my uncle. And it started there in terms of, this little awkward kid that came to the organization, and he and Echo actually acted as surrogate parents because they actually looked out for me and made sure that nothing bad happened or that I didn't get involved in inappropriate things and all of that. So they really sheltered me from the beginning from anything. So I just thought that was unique because you don't hear about such things today in terms of youth and gay youth in particular. So I thought that was wonderful that occurred to me.
And what type of activities did you then get involved in the chapter? How did your involvement in the chapter evolve?
It was actually what I did immediately was the social stuff in terms of, they had like volleyball games and different things going on, movie nights, they had fundraisers like car washes and different things like that. So I did more of the social stuff in the mixing in terms of really trying to develop a further understanding of what DWMT was, because I really didn't understand that, racism and all of these things were going on. So as as I grew and as I developed a further knowledge of what was going on, it hit me what was happening in terms of, people that were involved in interracial relationships, that how difficult that was, in that climate at that time. Even in 84, 85, then people were still having issues with carding and all of that stuff, I believe. I still remember a boycott of one of the bars that had been going on. Of course, I couldn't participate in that, I was old enough, but I remember that situation occurring in Milwaukee more than once.
So, because you were such a young age when you got involved with DWMC, were there other groups that you became a member of, or were you involved in other activities besides DWMC?
At that particular time, no. And I was talking about that with someone in another conversation. There really were not a lot of youth organizations around at that time like there is now. I mean, there was none, so BWNT was it, particularly in Milwaukee. And that's why I really am indebted to this organization because, anything could have happened to me, in terms of my curiosity. But the organization really embraced me, really made sure, and particularly when there were things occurring for 21 and above, obviously I couldn't be involved in that, and they made sure I knew that. But like the general things, the general membership things, like the volleyball games and all of that, yeah, they were very active, very much in favor of me, meeting people, age-appropriate people, and that sort of thing. So the organization has always been really important, crucial and essential in my development in the community.
So how long did your involvement with the Milwaukee chapter last?
Oh, probably that particular time, it was just the summer. I was just up there visiting my dad. But when I went back home, they also told me about Chicago, what was going on in Chicago. So DEA had a couple friends in Chicago, and I called them and let them know that, I wanted to help out when I can. And so I just developed, relationships with people, and so that's what I did.
So you had lived in Chicago the whole time?
Exactly.
And then you got involved with the Chicago chapter at some point?
Yes.
Was that soon thereafter? Or?
Actually, off and on, because I went to school in Michigan, and I got involved with the Detroit chapter. I was in Grand Rapids. I was going to school at Calvin, and then I used to go to Detroit for some of their events. And I believe it was Paul Sears that was in Detroit that watched out for me and was telling me what was going on then. But of course, I was of age, so. But I think the important part is in every city there was somebody that was in the organization that I could talk to that told me what was going on and what acclimated me to the environment, made me feel a part of the BWMC family, and that I just really think that made such a difference in terms of my development. Now you have all types of organizations for youth, but at that particular time it really wasn't a thing. At least I didn't find it.
So when were you first involved in Chicago?
Oh, I came back home in 91, 92. I think it was 92. I started getting involved in the local chapter. I remember I came to a couple of their events, and I believe there was Les. There was Les that was telling me, maybe I should step up to a leadership position in Chicago. And after, I remember it was like we had a dinner. I went over to dinner, and we talked, and I walked away with that from the conversation saying, why don't you? You know, you certainly have the history, you certainly have the relationships, you can grow to become a very good leader. And obviously, as someone such as that thought that I could do this, and I thought maybe I could. So I ran for co-chair of the Chicago chapter.
Right away.
Yeah, actually, we had a really good board too. We had a very good board. We worked very well together. I think Chicago at that point was going through a little bit of a rough patch, and actually it was a really good team atmosphere that caused a resurgence in interest and curiosity about MACC Chicago. So we really enjoyed a really good resurgence, I would say.
So you hadn't been in any leadership positions in Detroit or Milwaukee.
Yeah.
Now, were you co-chair during the Chicago convention in '93? Co-chair of the chapter, or was that later?
No, that was later. That was later. Yeah. So, but I mean, at that particular time, I had came back from school and I was getting acclimated to being an adult back in the Chicagoland area. And so by the time I actually became a co-chair, I was ready.
Mm-hmm.
I was ready to do that. I was ready to step into that role. And certainly under Leslie's, mentorship, I actually, turned out okay. In terms of doing the role. Because I didn't, it was something.
Well, we're glad to hear that.
Yeah, actually, I just didn't think about becoming a co-chair before, and so actually after I sat down and actually after doing it for a few years, probably 2 to 3 years, I look back on it now saying, why was I so scared? Yeah.
So you were co-chair in the mid-'90s for
Yeah.
Chicago, and then what was your involvement with the chapters there after that?
And then after that particular time, I ran for director on a national board.
Okay, well, we'll come back to that.
Yeah.
And you've maintained active participation in Chicago since?
Yes, what I wanted to do was, after 3 years, I really thought it was time that other people stepped into the role of co-chairship. I really am into fostering new talent and new leadership. Really think that's important. And so what I did was I stepped down and really actively tried to foster other individuals who could walk in that role to become the co-chair. So that's what I did. And I often came back to, I continued to do HIV prevention work in the chapter.
What was the nature of that work?
Basically, when I came back, I was working for the Cook County Health Department and as the HIV prevention specialist. And so I thought it was a nice bridge to bring that information to our local chapter. And that's what I did. We were doing sex workshops, made sure that people had condoms, and we always had, some type of discussion in terms of negotiating, risk reduction in your, relationship, because still, we had lost a lot of members to HIV and AIDS, and so we wanted to make sure that people were making better, wise choices in terms of their sexual behavior.
Had the chapter had an active HIV program before that?
I think off and on, I think HIV and AIDS have always been a really big issue in MACC Chicago. But I guess when I came back, I was at the health department, so it was easier to get certain materials into the local chapter. So it wasn't that I brought it to Chicago. It was already there, but I was part of the health department, so I could just bring some of the materials a little quicker. So, and that remains a really big, part of the Chicago chapter as well.
Yeah. Well, let's switch cities here for a minute. And Doug, asking you what your initial involvement with the NA was, and when, and how did it come about?
Oh, let's go back to 1985, December of 1985. I met a young man, young black guy. He was about 3 years younger than I was. We started dating, and then he told me about a meeting of BWMT, which meant Black and White Men Together, back in '85. So he took me to my first meeting in December of '85, and there was probably about 10, 15 guys there, and that was my introduction to MAC, or BWMT, Kansas City. I'd never even heard of this group before, and that was my first meeting.
Was that a social event or a
Yeah.
general meeting, or?
No, there was no meeting. I think it was just a social event. I think there was just some finger foods and some drinks and things like that. God, come on now, that was '85.
Hey.
I just can't remember if there was a meeting there or not. I don't remember some kind of agenda. I just remember a social gathering.
Do you remember what your initial impressions were when you were there? What did it feel like? Do you remember some people in particular?
Well,
How did it hit
I
you?
was just starting out in an interracial dating situation. That's the first black guy I've ever dated. It never even crossed my mind to date a black man until I met this guy in this club. And I thought it was kind of cool to have a club like that. And I had no problem with it. I mean, I thought it was interesting that, here are these folks getting together that date interracially. And the more I participated, the more I appreciated what was actually going on. I mean, back in '85, that was kind of a major statement back then.
So had your boyfriend or partner been involved with the group for a while, or was it basically new to him also?
I don't know when his first meeting was, but that was my first meeting. And what's interesting is we dated for 2 years, but after that first meeting or two, he stopped going, but I continued to go because I kept meeting some very interesting people. And I enjoyed the meetings, I enjoyed the functions because they would move around from house to house, place to place. And I just enjoyed the interaction with these other guys that pretty much had the same interests that I did. Now, my partner quit going, but I kept going. And probably within a year, I had already taken one of the positions of, I can't remember what it was, either treasurer or newsletter editor or something like that. So that was within the first year of becoming a member of that club, of the Kansas City Club.
So what kind of activities did the chapter do in those days?
Mostly social. There was a lot of gatherings at people's homes. There were a few parties. It wasn't real active at first, and then when I came in and it started growing, and then I took over. Now, I'm not saying it's all on me, but we started expanding our activities. We started going to movie nights at people's houses, game nights, dinner nights where we would choose a restaurant and go to those dinners, restaurants. So the activity started growing after a while, because the chapter was growing, actually. When I first joined, I think they may have had maybe 15, 20 members. And probably at its height, back in the early 90s, there were probably close to 50 members in Kansas City, 50 or 60.
So what kind of positions have you held with the chapter over the years?
In the local chapter, I think I've done it all. I've done the treasurer's job, the newsletter editor on an old typewriter even, cutting and pasting and photocopying that. Then at a time we used to have, when I first joined, there was a chair and then like a vice chair. And the vice chair's job was to take over when the chair stepped down after a year or two. And I thought that was an interesting arrangement because after a while we just did away with that and just had it as two co-chairs, pretty much like all the other chapters, because I didn't even know there were any other chapters around the country until I started getting more involved with our chapter. Then I learned, oh my gosh, there's a whole bunch of chapters around the country. And then I didn't even learn about the national organization until probably a year after I joined. So,
Did your chapter have business meetings apart from the social
yes,
events? Or?
yes. I finally...
Those were just the officers that came to those, or were they?
Well, no, the business meetings were open
Uh-huh.
to all the members, but usually it was just the officers there at their meetings. And that's when we planned all those other events, and we started expanding. At that time, BWMT's events, social events, and other events.
So
In a Midwestern city like Kansas City, what would you say has generally been the racial mix of the group, or at that time,
Actually, it's been pretty equal. Maybe 60-40 as far as probably a white majority, if you want to put it that way. But by and large, as long as the chapter existed, from what I can remember, it's always been very, very equal, I think. It's been pretty much 50-50. And that's both on the board and the general membership for Kansas City. That's one thing I was kind of impressed with. But now there was some times, like in the late 90s, that it seemed like there were probably more white officers in the organization than there was black. And then that started, when I first started, it was very equal. After a while, I started noticing that, we were almost pretty much white on the board. But you'll have to go back to also the AIDS epidemic in the late 80s and 90s, which for a while there, we were losing maybe 5-10 members a year for a while. And that really took a lot of our membership away back in the late 80s, early 90s.
Well, how has the chapter evolved, or as it turns out, disintegrated in the mid to late 90s? What happened as the 90s wore on?
Well, I mean, it's hard to pin it down, but in my opinion, I think it's because of a lot more choices in organizations. When I first started coming out in '85, there weren't that many choices for the gay community to go to. And communication within the gay community was very fragmented. Now it's, there's governing bodies for sports and for all these other organizations. There's just a lot more choices for people to go to. And we just seem to see our membership dwindle. We would get a few members in, and some of the old ones would hang on, but it just seems that we started losing members now. And I also contributed to maybe some of the leadership style. We had a couple of leaders back right before our demise in 2000 that they turned a lot of people off because the people skills were just not there. So I'm not going to name names. I'm just going to leave those folks out. But that turned a lot of our members off, and they just quit coming.
So this was a gradual process but finally ended in 2000.
Yeah. In 2000, one of our last newsletter, I begged people to run for the position because I had been co-chair for probably 10 years, off and on with some other folks. And it was basically the same people doing the same jobs all the time. We just kind of passed it around. And then I finally just said, look, folks, somebody's got to step up to the plate, take over the leadership position. I'm getting burned out. I need someone else to come in. If no one steps up, then there's no point in having an organization. And the meeting was at my house in September or October, something like that, of 2000, when I called for elections for officers. Nobody raised their hand for any position. And I said, that's fine. We'll just finish. So I closed the checking account, and I closed the P.O. box, and that was the end of MACT, Kansas City.
Does any particular thing come readily to mind as far as something that you're really proud of that the Kansas City chapter has done up in Boston or that has transpired over the last 10 years?
I would have to say probably in the I'll say mid-90s or beginning of the 90s to mid-90s. I thought our participation in the Midland chapters and at the national level was really picking up. We sent quite a few delegations to some of the nationals that were here around the Midwest area, and we also really jumped in there with the Midland because we hosted the Midland Regionals in '93 and in '97, and I would say between those years right there that our participation at the national level and the Midland level was at its height. And I was very proud of our chapter back then. We were getting our T-shirts made. We were getting our newsletter looking very professional. We were known in the community We did code check at one of the bars for 3 years. So people knew who we were back in the about mid to late 90s as far.
Now you mentioned the Midland. Could you, and I asked both of you this, could you sort of elaborate a little on what the Midland is? I mean, it seems to have been the most viable regional organization of DWT and MACT chapters of any that has existed, and it's sort of a wonder to the rest of us from other parts of the country. What type of experiences and development did you have and have you seen in the Midland over the years? And I'll ask this to both of you.
Well, all right. My first Midland was in Chicago at the old Bismarck Hotel downtown Chicago. And that was back in 88, 89, something like that, 87, 80, 89. I can't remember exactly what year, but I was just really taken back that there were that many guys in one hotel. You know, I had been dealing with my chapter for several years up to that point. And, you know, 10, 15, 20, 30 guys at the most may have been there. Now I was at a Midland level, and there's 40, 50, 60 guys in the room. And I was just, a lot of cute guys there too, but I was very taken back by the organizational structure of the Midland. I mean, it was structured pretty much like our chapter, and I was very impressed with the structural level of the Midland region. And I was just taken back by the professionalism of the way the meetings were conducted and some of the workshops and the outings. I was so impressed. And at that time, I still hadn't been to a national. So, you know, and that was even more impressive, my first national. But for the Midland and for somebody, you know, not involved in gay organizations, I was very impressed with the Midland and its level of, I don't know what I want to say, but just its level of organization.
I would say probably in 92, 93 is when I attended my first Midland. It was in St. Louis, actually. I believe it was their first and second year in existence, the PACT St. Louis. I was just very impressed with the level of brotherhood there. You know, people just really made you feel a part of something bigger than yourself. And another thing I really thought was incredible, I just thought the Midland was like a little mini convention of Midwestern chapters. And, you know, because you had, you know, really informative seminars, you know, on Saturdays. You took care of business in the morning on Saturdays. I was just blown away in terms of people's expertise as well, and just how much talent was in the Midland, you know, because most of my innovative and really great ideas came from the Midland, you know, in terms of what has been successful in the past. It's like you can find out what worked in other chapters, and you can borrow some of those ideas and take them home. And so I really thought it was an excellent opportunity to talk about different things and experiences in your local chapter. And exactly, if you were having difficulties in your local chapter, how did you overcome it? Exactly what did you do to when the situation arrived at your door? And so people were awfully friendly and very giving of themselves and their time and their expertise. And so I thought that was wonderful.
Now, Midland meetings are twice a year. Have they always been twice a year?
As far as I know, there's always been a fall and a spring regional.
And they continue to this
Yeah,
day.
that still continues.
Have either or both of you been involved in the leadership structure of the Midland?
I have not. I know you have.
Yeah, I along with Ed Fleming, became the Midland Regional co-chair back, I believe, after the national in D.C., which was what, 94? Okay, yeah. So after I stepped down from the national board, Ed and I took over the leadership of the Midland for 2 years. And that was my extent of being involved with the Midland as far as that officer's position.
And the Midland includes chapters, well, how many chapters approximately?
Well, at that time, there was about 12 Midland chapters, anywhere from, from Milwaukee to Dallas, from Kansas City to Columbus or of Youngstown and Detroit. Cincinnati. It's a large region, really it is.
Back on the record. Well, let me ask you both, and you can do this and fight among yourselves as to who's going to speak first. How did you first become involved with the National? When was that? Why was it? What was it like?
Well, for me, it was probably right after I finished my third year as coach here in Chicago. I just thought that it was a natural progression. And by then, I had been attending a fair amount of the conventions. I had sat in on some of the board meetings, and I wanted to do more. I wanted to help out. I wanted to become more active on a national level. I felt like I was ready.
What was your first convention?
1987, and I remember Josephine
Milwaukee.
In Milwaukee, and the explosive situation that happened with Josephine came there and landblasted all the African American men there for being involved in such an organization. I actually was pretty conflicted with that because Josephine was somebody I really respected, and I still do, but I just couldn't believe that the way it came out was so harsh. So that was the first convention that I went to in Milwaukee. It was pretty unforgettable. But I remember that particular incident because some of the members were very upset. It was just kind of a divisive situation. And I was just watching Josephine, how he conducted himself. You know, although I disagreed with the way it came out, I really admired him, the way he conducted himself. And he was just a very strong black gay man in his beliefs. And he was very good under fire, I thought.
I think it's very interesting that you bring up that point because 87 was the first national convention that I attended also. And I had some of the very same feelings that you had when Mr. B spoke. And the thing that I found really, really interesting was at the end of his speech, he received a standing ovation led by the White brothers in the group, who he had really completely lambasted, which was really mind-boggling to me. Do you remember that?
Yes, I do. Yes, I do. I stood there and I watched. I actually looked like I was studying him because he was just unbelievable. I really admired the way he conducted himself. He was just very strong in his beliefs, and I just learned from that situation that you can agree to disagree with somebody, but it doesn't mean that you have to be disrespectful because you disagreed on a particular issue. And he was just someone I just really admired. I really admired his passion for his beliefs.
Now, you attended that convention, which was also marked by the famous name change debate. Did you participate in that? Do you have any recollection of that?
I remember it being very divisive. I remember people were really strong in their convictions on both sides. I understood why people didn't believe that we should change our name, and it's something that I agree with. If you look at the NAACP, the National Advancement of Colored People, I mean, the name still exists. Even though African Americans have gone through several different name changes over the decades, and I just feel like our organization started out as the International Association of Black and White Men Together to the National Association of Black and White Men Together, but the Black and White Men Together has never changed, and I do believe that that's who we are, and that's who we should remain. So that's my standing on it.
Well, what was your first convention, Doug? Or your first involvement with the NA, I should say, in case it wasn't a convention.
I would have to say it was, I think, the 1990 convention in San Francisco. That was my first convention. And at that convention, we were asked to bring our banners because we had a contingent in the San Francisco Gay Parade. And I just remember all of our banners from most of the chapters, which was approximately about, I would have to say 15 to 20 chapters actually brought their banners. And we marched behind the national banner. And I remember walking along Castro Street, not Castro Street, but Market Street.
Market Street.
And I was just blown away by the number of people there. There was close to, 500,000 people along the parade route. And it was so nice to hear people cheer for your city when you carried your banner by, because there were people from all over the country, probably all over the world, in San Francisco. And so when the cities would walk by, you would hear people cheer and yell out, your city. And I was just too impressed. I was just totally blown away by that whole experience. That's probably the most memorable experience I've ever had, was marching with some of my fellow chapter members behind my chapter banner with all the other chapters, and then of course the NA banner leading the way down the parade. That was just a memorable moment.
Let me ask you both, again, since both of you had been involved locally for some time before you went to a national convention, what was your initial feeling, if you remember, about the national vis-a-vis your prior experience in the local? How was it different? Was it different? Did you have a totally different feel? What was it like?
I wouldn't say a totally different feel, as I would say it was just overwhelming, because it was men from all over the country. It was brotherhood all over the country. I mean, it was just the local chapter times 30. It was just very overwhelming. I like the fact that when you went to a national and you developed relationships with people, people always said, whenever you're in town, please stop over and see us. It was like you had an extended family all over the United States. It was wonderful. And that's a feeling that still remains, to this day, is that I feel very close with many of the brothers in the organization. Those relationships have only grown since I've been around. So it was that was the distinct difference, just in terms of having brothers all over the country. In addition to your home city, I just feel like no matter wherever I went in the country, I could always stop into a local town that had a chapter and call them and tell them I was in town, and they would be more than happy to greet me and make me feel a part of that city. So I thought that was wonderful.
How did you feel initially? I mean, what was it like, coming to a national meeting as opposed to your local?
I have two feelings on that. One, I'll agree with Preston with a lot of the emotions that I felt were just really uplifting. To be in the room, I mean, we were on San Francisco State, and there was like a religious group or something there staying at the same time, and it was something else just to see all of us and then all of them, and we were all in the same dorm together basically, and the interactions sometimes negative, mostly positive. And then I went to my first meeting, not a general membership, but a House of Delegates meeting, and sitting there, I was like, now just a few moments ago, these folks were all hugging and kissing and greeting each other, and then the very next day, these folks were pouncing all over each other in this meeting. Mm-hmm. You had some very aggressive chapters there, very aggressive individuals, and I was getting mixed messages in this meeting. I thought, now wait a minute, these folks were very cordial yesterday, and today they're tearing each other apart. And I thought, my God, what did I walk into? Because that was my first House of Delegates meeting. I had no idea of the procedures or the agenda. I just sat in there, and I think my mouth was just hanging to the floor watching these people barbecue each other in this meeting. But, it all worked out. After the meeting, there was hugs and kisses again, so I thought, oh, okay, everything's cool. They're not going to walk off hating each other's guts. Everybody came back together, and that's when I knew that I've got to attend more of these.
Did Kansas City have official delegates to that meeting?
Yeah.
Or were you the official delegate?
No, Mark Mitchell and I can't remember who else was there, but we were our delegates for our chapter, because I think he and I were the ones that went to that one. And there were some more people from Kansas City. I just can't remember who they were.
Do you remember any of the issues or personalities that have left this imprint on your mind from that meeting?
Well,
remember what was being discussed? Who was?
What I can
who were these people that
remember-
were barbecuing each
Right,
other?
from what I
and
can
who got
remember-
barbecued?
No, not me. No,
Who got barbecued?
I was a fly on the wall watching all this stuff go back and forth. We were sitting in a large classroom on San Francisco State University. We were in a large circle, and it seemed like the New York delegation was over here trying to push their will of the name change. Again, I think 1990 was the first time it was BWMT, or NABWMT, and there was a big push to change the national name. I think New York chapter may have already changed their name by then, or were in the process of naming or renaming themselves. But New York and several other chapters were in there, and their members were very adamant and vocal and stubborn about the issue. I was just like, okay, these people are very, strong-willed about that. But there were equally strong-willed people that did not want to change the name and leave it as is. And it was a tennis match, watching several of the strong chapters at that time. The East and West Coast dominated, I believe, the NA board at that time. And I'd have to look at the list of officers, but I think they dominated the board at that time. But the New York chapter did not prevail at that moment, and there was a lot of anger over that. But like I said, they all got over it, and they all came back together.
Well, I want to ask both of you, and obviously to some extent you've already answered this for specific conventions, but do you have particular memories from each convention you've attended? And I think you've both attended all the conventions since then. Maybe you missed one or two, I don't know.
Missed a couple.
Why don't we start with you, Preston, because you were the couple before Doug, and then when we get to 1990, you can both go back and forth as to the ones you attended jointly.
Right. To me, like I said before, the 87 convention was probably the one that sticks out in my mind because of Josephine. There was in Washington, D.C., I believe that was 94, Nina Katz. She was a Holocaust survivor and moved me to tears. I remember her distinctly because she was a quiet, outspoken woman, and I remember when she was talking, and she was very quiet in her delivery, and you could just, the room was so quiet that, she didn't have to yell, and she was conveying her experiences about the Holocaust, and it was just so life-changing. So, 94 convention in Washington, D.C., it was Nina Katz, definitely.
Any others?
You want me to keep going through
Any year you remember, and that's both of you really, any year that sticks out, or you can go year by year?